The text message glared at me from my husband's phone. Missing you already. Last night was incredible. My hands trembled as I read it again, though I'd already memorized every word. 3 years of marriage, and this was how I discovered Daryl's true colours. I'm Bailey, and this is how my life imploded on an ordinary Tuesday morning. You're being paranoid, honey, my mother Vivienne's voice crackled through my phone speaker. Daryl would never cheat on you. He's such a good provider. I paced our kitchen, my bare feet cold against the tile floor. Mum, I saw the messages. They're from his co-worker Kylie. There are hotel receipts in his email. Maybe it's for work. You know how many business trips he takes. The dismissal in her voice made my stomach churn. Work trips don't include heart emojis and lingerie photos, Mom. Bailey, stop. You're embarrassing yourself. What will people think? I hung up and slumped against the counter, fighting back tears. My own mother choosing appearances over truth. Again. The front door clicked open and Daryl's whistling filled the hallway. I quickly wiped my eyes and straightened up. Hey, babe! He strode in, all perfect smile and designer suit. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. I watched his face carefully. How was your late meeting last night? His smile didn't waver. Productive. We finally closed the Henderson deal. Really? At the Marriott downtown? The briefest flicker crossed his face before he recovered. What are you talking about? I held up his phone. You left this on the counter this morning, forgot to lock it. The colour drained from his face. You went through my phone. Don't you dare make this about privacy, Daryl. How long have you been sleeping with Kylie? He ran his hands through his hair, switching tactics. Baby, it's not what you think. She's just... Don't. My voice shook. Don't lie to me anymore. The doorbell rang, making us both jump. My father Ernest's booming voice called out, Bailey? Daryl? Daryl's expression shifted to something calculating. We should talk about this later, he whispered urgently. Before I could respond, my father walked in. There you are. Vivienne called me, said you were having some sort of crisis. Dad, Bailey's just tired. Daryl cut in smoothly, placing his hand on my shoulder. I flinched away. She found some work emails and jumped to conclusions. My father's face hardened. Is this true, Bailey? Are you causing trouble again? Again? I stared at him incredulously. When have I ever... Remember Tommy Peterson in high school? You accused him of cheating on you too, and it turned out he was planning your birthday party. I was 16. This is completely different. Sweetheart, Daryl's voice dripped with concern, maybe you should lie down. You're not thinking clearly. I watched in horror as my father nodded sympathetically. Listen to your husband, Bailey. He only wants what's best for you. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend Adeline. Got your message? I'm outside. Need backup? I grabbed my purse. I need some air. Bailey. My father's warning tone stopped me at the door. Don't do anything rash. Think about the family. I turned back, meeting Daryl's smug expression. Oh, I am thinking about family, and I'm thinking about how easily they can betray you. I slammed the door behind me, practically running to Adeline's car. As I slid into the passenger seat, she took one look at my face and pulled away from the curb. Your mom called me, she said. Tried to convince me to talk some sense into you. I laughed bitterly. Of course she did. Heaven forbid their perfect son-in-law's reputation get tarnished. So, what's the plan? I pulled out my phone, opening the screenshots I'd taken. First, we're going to the bank. There's something weird about these messages. Kylie mentioned something about the account being ready. I need to know what they're hiding. And then? I thought about Daryl's smug face, my father's dismissal, my mother's denial. Then we're going to burn their perfect little world to the ground. Adeline grinned. Now that sounds like a plan I can get behind. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of Daryl watching from the window, phone pressed to his ear. Let him scramble. Let him worry. Because what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that his text messages to Kylie weren't the only things I'd found on his phone that morning. There was something much darker hiding in his email drafts. Something that would make his affair look like a minor indiscretion in comparison. Account number 547891. The bank teller frowned at her screen. I'm sorry, but I don't see any joint accounts with that number. It has to be there, I insisted, showing her the screenshot from Daryl's phone. Could you check again? She shook her head. The only accounts I see are your personal checking and the joint household account. Adeline squeezed my arm. Try his name alone. I'm sorry, but I can't access accounts where you're not listed as an owner. Walking out of the third bank that morning, I kicked a trash can in frustration. Dead end. Again. Not necessarily, Adeline said, pulling me toward a coffee shop. Your brother-in-law Aidan works in finance, right? Maybe he knows something. I stopped short. That's actually brilliant. 20 minutes later, we sat across from Aidan in his sleek downtown office. He looked exactly like Daryl, but with kinder eyes and worse fashion sense. Bailey, this is a surprise. He hugged me warmly. Everything okay? Daryl mentioned something about you being upset this morning. Did he mention why? Aidan shifted uncomfortably. He said you weren't feeling well, might be making some accusations. Show him, Adeline nudged me. I handed over my phone. Aidan's face darkened as he scrolled through the messages. That son of a... I'm so sorry, Bailey. I need your help, Aidan. There's something weird about their messages. They keep referencing an account, but I can't find it at any local banks. He frowned. Could be offshore. Actually. He trailed off, looking troubled. What? Last month, Daryl asked me about setting up a shell corporation. Said it was for a client. I gave him some basic information, including a contact in the Cayman Islands. My heart raced. Did he use it? I don't know, but... Aidan typed something into his computer. Hold on. Last week, he had me sign some paperwork as a witness. Said it was routine business stuff, but he seemed nervous. Do you have copies? No, but I remember the company name. Blue Harbor Ventures. I wrote it down with shaking hands. Aidan, I need one more favor. Don't tell Daryl about this conversation. He looked between me and the messages again. Count on it. And Bailey. Whatever he's involved in, be careful. Back in Adeline's car, my phone exploded with notifications. 3 missed calls from my mother, 2 from my father, and a text from my brother Seth. Mom's having a meltdown. What's going on? We should call Seth, Adeline suggested. He's always had your back. I dialed his number. He answered immediately. Finally. Are you okay? Not really. Can you meet us? 30 minutes later, we sat in a quiet corner of a diner. Seth listened intently as I explained everything, his expression growing darker. I knew something was off with Daryl lately, he said. Last month at Dad's birthday, I overheard him arguing with someone on the phone about moving the timeline up. There's more, I said. I found something in his email drafts, messages to someone about cleaning money through real estate deals. Seth, I think he's involved in something illegal. Jesus, Seth ran a hand through his hair. Have you told Mom and Dad? They won't listen. They think I'm making everything up. Classic Mom and Dad, he scoffed. Remember when I tried to tell them about catching Dad's business partner embezzling? They didn't believe me until the FBI showed up. My phone buzzed. Daryl again. I declined the call. What's your next move? Seth asked. Blue Harbor Ventures. If Daryl's hiding money, that's where we'll find it. Seth pulled out his laptop. Let me help. I know some people who... He stopped mid-sentence, staring at his screen. Bailey, look at this. He turned the laptop around. On the screen was a news article from 3 years ago. Local real estate developer found dead in apparent suicide. Below was a photo of a man I'd never seen before, but the name made my blood run cold. He was the previous owner of Blue Harbor Ventures. The article says he was about to be indicted for money laundering, Seth read. The company was sold shortly after his death. Bailey, the sale date matches when Daryl first started his business trips. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Daryl. Coming home late tonight. Business dinner with Aidan. I showed it to Seth, who immediately pulled out his phone and called his wife. Hey, is Aidan home? He is. Thanks. He hung up. his face grim. Aiden's been homesick all day. Daryl's lying. Again, I whispered. Bailey, Adeline's voice was urgent. Look who just walked into the diner. Through the window, I saw Kylie getting out of her car, heading for the entrance. She hadn't seen us yet. Seth grabbed our things. Back door, now. As we slipped out, I caught a glimpse of Kylie answering her phone, her face anxious. Whatever Daryl was involved in, she was deep in it too, and I was getting closer to the truth. Seth's apartment felt like a war room, with laptops open and papers scattered across his dining table. My head spun as memories crashed over me, everything taking on new meaning in light of what we'd discovered. Remember when you first met Daryl? Adeline asked, sorting through bank statements. I did. The charity gala 5 years ago. He'd seemed so genuine, passionate about his real estate development projects, helping low-income communities. He said all the right things, I muttered, played the perfect part. Look at this, Seth interrupted, pointing at his screen. Blue Harbour Ventures has purchased 6 properties in the last 2 years, all cash deals. That's not unusual for real estate, I said. No, but this is... Every property was condemned within months of purchase, then resold at massive profits to shell companies that disappear. My phone lit up with a text from my mother. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of your behaviour. Come home and apologise to Daryl. I threw the phone across the couch. Bailey, Adeline's voice was strange. When did Daryl take that trip to Miami last year? March, I think. Why? She held up a document. Because according to this, he was in the Cayman Islands, meeting with someone named Marcus. The name hit me like a punch. Marcus? Daryl mentioned that name in his sleep last week. He sounded scared. Seth's printer whirred to life. Found something else. The previous owner of Blue Harbour? His suicide note was typed. His wife insisted he never typed anything, said he was old school, wrote everything by hand. Jesus, Adeline whispered. A knock at the door made us all jump. Seth checked the security camera and relaxed. It's just Aiden. But when he opened the door, Aiden wasn't alone. My father stood behind him. What the hell is this? Dad demanded, storming in. Some kind of conspiracy meeting? How did you know I was here? I asked. Tracked your phone, he said dismissively. Bailey, this has gone far enough. You're embarrassing the family. Embarrassing the family? I stood up, anger burning through me. Daryl is cheating on me and possibly involved in criminal activity, but you're worried about embarrassment? Criminal activity? Aiden looked pale. What are you talking about? Seth quickly filled him in. With each detail, Aiden's face grew more shocked. The Shell Corporation paperwork, he said slowly. There was something else. A list of offshore accounts. I thought it was weird, but Daryl said it was standard practice for high-end real estate deals. Ernest, Seth turned to our father. You have to see this isn't normal. Dad's face reddened. All I see is my children trying to destroy a good man's reputation. Daryl has done nothing but provide for this family. He even helped me secure investors for my retirement fund. Something clicked. What investors, Dad? Through Blue Harbour. Daryl set it all up. Guaranteed returns, tax-free offshore accounts. The room went silent. Seth and I exchanged horrified looks. Dad, I said carefully, did you give Daryl money to invest? Of course I did. Your mother and I both did. Our entire retirement fund. My legs gave out. Adeline caught me before I hit the floor. How much? Seth demanded. 2 million. Dad's voice wavered for the first time. Why? What's wrong? Before anyone could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Back off, Bailey, or the next suicide won't be faked. I showed it to Seth, whose face hardened. Dad, sit down. There's something you need to see. For the next hour, we walked him through everything, the properties, the shell companies, the suspicious death. With each revelation, his face grew grayer. This can't be right, he kept saying. Daryl wouldn't... He would, Aiden's voice cracked, and I helped him. God, I signed those papers without even reading them. Another text lit up my phone, from my mother. Daryl just came by, says you're spreading vicious lies. How could you do this to us? Mom's retirement fund, I whispered. All their savings. We need to go to the police, Adeline said. No, Seth and Aidan spoke simultaneously. Not yet, Seth continued. If Daryl suspects we're onto him, that money disappears forever. We need proof first. I might know where to get it, Aidan said quietly. There's a property Daryl never lets anyone visit. An old warehouse on the east side. He keeps it off all official records, but I saw the deed once. Then that's our next stop, I said, standing up. Bailey. My father's voice stopped me. He looked suddenly old, defeated. I'm sorry, I should have listened. I squeezed his hand. We're going to fix this, Dad, but first, we need to find out exactly what we're dealing with. What we didn't know then was that the warehouse would change everything and put all our lives in danger. The warehouse loomed before us in the fading daylight, its broken windows like dark, empty eyes. Seth pulled his car around back, killing the engine. Security cameras, Aidan pointed out, but they're fake. Daryl had me order them last year, just empty shells to scare people off. How do we get in? I asked. Service entrance. Aidan led us to a rusty door. I saw him use this once, the code should be. He punched in numbers. The lock clicked. Wait! Seth grabbed my arm. Maybe you should stay in the car. Not a chance. Inside, our flashlights revealed mountains of filing cabinets and stacked boxes. The air smelled of mold and something else, something chemical. Over here, Adeline called out. She stood before a newer-looking door with a keypad. This looks important. Aidan tried the same code. Nothing. Try his birthday, I suggested. No. Wait. Aidan's face lit up. The date Blue Harbour was incorporated. He punched in the numbers. The door swung open. The room beyond was different. Clean, organised, with a desk and computer. File boxes lined the walls, each labelled with property addresses. Look for anything about Marcus, Seth said, booting up the computer. I grabbed the nearest box and started digging. The documents inside made my stomach turn. Fake inspection reports, forged permits, wire transfers to numbered accounts. Guys, Adeline's voice shook. These aren't just property records. They're proof of money laundering. Millions of dollars worth. Found Marcus, Seth announced from the computer. Multiple emails between him and Daryl. They're... Jesus. What? They're discussing how to handle the previous owner of Blue Harbour, the one who supposedly committed suicide. A noise from outside the room made us freeze. Footsteps. Hide, Seth hissed. We scrambled behind filing cabinets just as voices approached. The money needs to move tonight, a woman said. Kylie. It's not that simple, Daryl's voice replied. Bailey's digging. She got to Aidan somehow. Then shut her up. Marcus is getting nervous. He doesn't like loose ends. She's my wife. She's a liability like the last one. My blood ran cold. The last one? That was different, Daryl said. He was going to talk to the FBI. And now your wife is talking to anyone who'll listen. Fix it, Daryl, or Marcus will. Their footsteps retreated. The outer door clicked shut. We emerged from hiding, faces pale. The last one, Adeline whispered. Bailey, you don't think... The previous owner, Seth said grimly. They killed him. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, ready to call the police. No signal. We need to get out of here, Aidan said. Now. We grabbed what documents we could, but as we reached the outer door, headlights swept across the windows. A car was pulling up. Back door, Seth whispered. We crept through the warehouse, hearts pounding. A door slammed outside. Check everything, an unfamiliar male voice ordered. If they've been here, I want to know. We reached the back door just as footsteps entered the warehouse. Seth eased it open, wincing at the creak. Did you hear that? The voice asked. Run! Seth pushed me forward. We sprinted across the parking lot. A shout behind us, then the crack of a gunshot. Adeline screamed. Split up! Seth yelled. Meet at the safe place. I ran with Aidan toward a fence while Seth and Adeline went the other way. More shots rang out. Up and over. Aidan boosted me onto the fence. I scrambled across, then helped pull him up. We didn't stop running until we reached his car, parked several blocks away. Shaking, I checked my phone. 1 bar of signal. Call Seth, Aidan gasped. The phone rang 4 times before Seth answered. We're okay. We're safe. Meet you there. 20 minutes later, we regrouped at Seth's friend's cabin outside town. As soon as I saw Adeline and Seth, I broke down crying. The documents, Seth pulled crumpled papers from his jacket. We got enough. Bank records, emails, everything. They tried to kill us. Adeline's voice trembled. They actually shot at us. My phone buzzed. Daryl. Where are you? Your mother's worried sick. Another text followed. Come home, Bailey. We can work this out. Then a third. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Bailey. Seth gripped my shoulders. We need to take this to the FBI. Tonight. What about Mom and Dad's money? If we don't stop this now, more people will die. Aiden's voice was firm. Like the last owner. Like they're planning for you. I took a deep breath and dialed the FBI's number. As it rang, another text from Daryl appeared. Last chance, Bailey. Think about your family. I was thinking about my family. And I was going to save them from the monster they'd welcomed into our lives. Mrs. Brooks, FBI agent Sarah leaned forward in her chair. We've been investigating Blue Harbor Ventures for months, but we never had enough evidence to move forward. Until now. The federal building's interview room felt cold and sterile. Seth sat beside me while Aiden and Adeline gave separate statements down the hall. What happens next? I asked. We move carefully, Agent Sarah replied. Your husband has powerful connections. We need to coordinate with multiple jurisdictions, freeze accounts. My phone lit up. Mom again. Family emergency meeting. Now. Your father's not well. They're trying to lure you out, Seth warned. Agent Sarah nodded. We can protect you, but you'll need to stay in a safe house. What about my parents? We'll watch them too, but... The door burst open. Another agent rushed in, face tense. We have a problem. Someone tipped them off. Accounts are being emptied as we speak. How many? All of them, including the ones linked to the parents' retirement fund. My stomach lurched. No. There's more, the agent continued. Kylie Salazar just booked a flight to the Caymans. Leaves in 2 hours. Agent Sarah cursed. We can't touch her there. Not without a lengthy legal process. I can. I stood up. Bailey, no. Seth grabbed my arm. She knows everything, Seth, and she's about to disappear with our parents' money. It's too dangerous, Agent Sarah warned. Then arrest her. We don't have enough to hold her yet. The documents you provided are still being authenticated. I checked the time. The airport's 30 minutes away. I can get her to talk. Absolutely not, Agent Sarah said firmly. But I was already moving. Seth followed me out. This is insane, he said as we rushed to his car. You don't have to come. Like hell I don't. We reached the airport with an hour to spare. I spotted Kylie immediately at the first-class check-in, designer luggage at her feet. Stay back, I told Seth. Be ready with your phone. I approached her slowly. She saw me coming and froze. Running away, Kylie? She glanced around nervously. I'm late for my flight. To the Caymans? With my parents' retirement fund? I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Should we call Marcus and ask him? Her face went white. You don't know what you're dealing with. I know about the previous owner, the suicide that wasn't. Bailey, her voice dropped to a whisper. If you know what's good for you, you'll walk away. Like you walked away with $2 million of my parents' money. Better than walking away in a body bag. Is that what happened to Daryl's first wife? Kylie's composure cracked. What? You mentioned the last one at the warehouse, but the previous owner was a man. So who are you talking about? She grabbed my arm, pulling me aside. Stop digging, please. You have no idea what these people are capable of. Then tell me. She looked around again, then leaned in close. Daryl's first wife didn't die in a car accident like everyone thinks. She found out about the operation, about Marcus, about everything. My blood ran cold. Daryl killed her. Marcus did. Made it look like an accident, just like he did with the previous owner when he wouldn't play ball. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know what I was getting into. By the time I figured it out, I was in too deep. Help us stop them. I can't. They'll kill me. We can protect you. The FBI is already here. Agent Sarah's voice came from behind us. Kylie spun around to find herself surrounded by agents. How? Your phone, I said. Seth was broadcasting our entire conversation to them. Kylie's shoulders slumped. If I talk, I want protection. Already arranged, Agent Sarah said, leading her away. My phone buzzed one last time. Daryl, you've made a terrible mistake. Then another text from an unknown number. Smart girl, but not smart enough. Check on your parents. My heart stopped. I showed Seth the message. Go, Agent Sarah ordered. We'll send backup. We raced to our parents' house, breaking every speed limit. The front door was open when we arrived. Inside, we found Mom crying on the couch. Dad nowhere in sight. Where is he? I demanded. Daryl came by, she sobbed. Said he needed Dad's help with some urgent paperwork. They left 20 minutes ago. Where? The warehouse. Daryl said something about saving what was left of the retirement fund. Seth was already calling Agent Sarah as we ran back to the car, but we both knew we might be too late. The sun was setting as we sped toward the warehouse, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this time someone wasn't making it out alive. FBI's 10 minutes out, Seth said as we parked a block from the warehouse. We should wait. Dad doesn't have 10 minutes. I was already moving, staying in the shadows. 2 cars sat in the warehouse parking lot, Daryl's Mercedes and a black SUV I'd never seen before. Voices drifted from inside. Get closer, I whispered to Seth, but stay hidden. We crept to a broken window. Inside, Dad stood with Daryl and a tall man I assumed was Marcus. Dad's face was ashen. Sign it, Marcus said, pushing papers across a table. Transfer everything to the new accounts. Ernest? Daryl's voice was gentle, reasonable. It's the only way to protect what's left. What happened to the rest? Dad's voice shook. Your daughter happened, Marcus snapped. Her little FBI stunt triggered our fail-safes. Most accounts are already emptied. You promised, Dad started. I promised returns if you kept quiet, Daryl cut in. Bailey changed the game. Sign it, Marcus repeated, or your retirement fund won't be your biggest problem. Dad picked up the pen. My heart raced. Don't. I stepped through the door before Seth could stop me. Everyone spun around. Daryl's face darkened. Marcus reached under his jacket. Bailey, run, Dad yelled. Nobody's running. Marcus pulled out a gun. Though I'm glad you're here, Bailey. Saves us the trouble of hunting you down. The FBI's already on their way, I said. Then we'll make this quick. He turned to Daryl. Handle your wife. I'll deal with Daddy dearest. Daryl stepped toward me. You should have left it alone, Bailey. Like your first wife did? He stopped cold. Dad looked between us, confused. What is she talking about? Tell him, Daryl, I pressed. Tell him how you and Marcus murdered her when she discovered your scheme, just like you murdered the previous owner of Blue Harbor. That's a lie, Dad said weakly. Ask him about the suicide note, I continued. Ask him why it was typed when everyone knew the man never used computers. Enough, Marcus raised the gun. Or ask about the offshore accounts, I kept talking, watching Seth slip through another entrance behind them. Ask where the money really went. Ask about the properties that mysteriously burned down after being insured for millions. I said enough, Marcus aimed at my chest. Several things happened at once. Dad lunged for Marcus. Daryl reached for me, and Seth brought a metal pipe down on Marcus's arm. The gun went off, the bullet hitting a wall. I drove my knee into Daryl's stomach as he grabbed me. He doubled over but managed to catch my ankle as I tried to run. Marcus recovered quickly, shoving Dad aside and reaching for the dropped gun. Seth kicked it away, sending it sliding across the floor. You're both dead, Marcus snarled, pulling another gun from an ankle holster. Sirens wailed in the distance. It's over, I gasped, still struggling with Daryl. Kylie told them everything. Kylie? Daryl's grip loosened slightly. She's in protective custody. The FBI has all the documents, all the proof. You're lying, Marcus said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. Check your phone, Seth suggested. Check the news. The story's already breaking. Marcus pulled out his phone with his free hand. His face went pale. The sirens grew louder. Red and blue lights flashed outside. We need to go, Marcus grabbed Daryl's arm. Now! Daryl released me, backing away. I'm sorry, Bailey, I never meant... Save it, I spat. They ran for the back door, but Seth's voice stopped them. That exit's already covered. He was bluffing, but they didn't know that. They hesitated just long enough for the FBI to burst in through the main entrance. Federal agents, hands up! Marcus raised his gun. 3 agents fired simultaneously. He dropped, clutching his shoulder. Darryl immediately raised his hands. I can explain everything. Save it for your lawyer, Agent Sarah said, cuffing him. Dad sat heavily on a nearby chair, looking shell-shocked. Bailey, I'm so sorry. I should have believed you. I hugged him tightly. It's okay, Dad. No, it's not. He pulled back, his eyes wet. Your mother and I, we were so wrong about everything. Mr. Brooks, Agent Sarah approached. We'll need your statement. As Dad followed her, Seth pulled me aside. You okay? I watched Darryl being led away in handcuffs, his perfect facade finally crumbling. I will be. My phone buzzed. Adeline. Just saw the news. You did it. But it wasn't over yet. There was still one more confrontation waiting, telling Mom the whole truth about the man she'd defended so fiercely. And somehow, that scared me more than anything else that had happened tonight. The family room felt smaller than I remembered. Mom paced by the window while Dad sat slumped in his armchair. Seth and Adeline flanked me on the couch like bodyguards. This is ridiculous, Mom said for the 3rd time. There must be some mistake. The FBI doesn't make mistakes like this, Vivian. Dad's voice was tired. I saw everything with my own eyes. But Darryl wouldn't. He did, I cut in. And you need to hear all of it. I nodded to Seth, who opened his laptop and pulled up the news articles. Mom's hands shook as she read the headlines. Local real estate developer arrested in money laundering scheme. Blue Harbor Ventures linked to previous owner's death. Multiple arrests in multi-million-dollar fraud case. There's more, I said softly. About his first wife. Mom's head snapped up. What about her? She didn't die in a car accident. I took a deep breath. They killed her because she discovered what they were doing. No, Mom collapsed into a chair. No, that's not. He was devastated when she died. He could barely talk about it. Because he was guilty, Seth said. The FBI found evidence in Marcus's files, emails discussing how to handle her, just like they planned to handle Bailey. They shot at us, Mom, I added. At the warehouse. They were going to kill me, too. Mom's face crumpled. But he was family. We trusted him. I defended him to everyone. That's what he counted on, Adeline spoke up. He used your loyalty against you. The retirement fund, Mom turned to Dad. Tell me we didn't lose everything. Dad couldn't meet her eyes. They're trying to recover what they can, but most of it's gone. A knock at the door made everyone jump. Agent Sarah entered, looking grim. We found something else, she said. Mrs. Brooks, we need to discuss your signature on some documents. My signature? Mom frowned. What documents? Transfer papers for additional properties under Blue Harbor Ventures. Your signature appears on several of them. That's impossible. I never signed anything. Show her. Agent Sarah handed over a file. Mom's face went white as she looked at the papers. These aren't my signatures. Someone forged them. We believe Darryl used these documents to secure additional loans. The properties were then intentionally condemned and resold at massive profits. He forged my signature? Mom's voice cracked. How many times? We've identified 17 instances so far. Mom stood up suddenly, running to the bathroom. We could hear her getting sick. She'll need to make a formal statement, Agent Sarah said quietly. I'll bring her in tomorrow, Dad promised. After Agent Sarah left, Mom emerged, her face streaked with tears. I kept telling you to apologize to him, she said, looking at me. I called you paranoid, difficult. My own daughter, and I chose him. Mom, no, let me finish, she straightened up. I failed you, Bailey. I failed this whole family. I was so concerned with appearances, with what people would think. We all were, Dad added. We let him blind us. The preliminary hearing is next week, Seth said. They want us all to testify. Mom nodded firmly. Good. I want to look him in the eye when I tell the truth. You'll have to face him, Adeline warned. Both of them. Marcus will be there too. I'm not afraid anymore, Mom said. I'm angry. My phone buzzed. A text from Aiden. Just finished my FBI interview. You need to see what they found in Daryl's private email. What is it? Seth asked, seeing my expression. I don't know, but Aiden's coming over. 20 minutes later, Aiden burst in, waving a stack of papers. They found emails between Daryl and Marcus going back 5 years, he said. Before he even met Bailey, they planned everything, including how to infiltrate your family. What do you mean? Dad asked. They researched you, all of you. They knew about your retirement fund, your connections in the community. They chose you specifically. Mom made a small, broken sound. The charity gala where we met, I said slowly. That wasn't coincidence, was it? No, Aiden confirmed. They orchestrated the whole thing. Every moment of your relationship was calculated. The room fell silent as the full weight of the manipulation sank in. The hearing, Mom said finally. I don't want to just testify. I want to make a victim impact statement. I want everyone to know exactly what he did to this family. We'll all be there, Seth promised. Together, Dad added, taking Mom's hand. I looked around at my family, battered but unbroken. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something like hope. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Daryl had one last surprise waiting. Something we hadn't discovered yet. And I was right. The courthouse hallway buzzed with tension. Reporters clustered outside, held back by security. Mom gripped my hand as we waited to enter. Ready? Seth asked. Before I could answer, Adeline rushed up, waving her phone. You need to see this, now. She pulled us into an empty conference room and played a video. It showed Daryl in his jail cell speaking to someone off camera. If I'm going down, his voice was cold, the whole family burns. Play the recording. The video cut to security footage of Dad's office from 3 years ago. Dad sat at his desk counting cash, lots of cash. He was setting us up, I whispered. The whole time he was gathering blackmail material. There's more, Adeline said. This just leaked to every major news outlet. Mum's face hardened. Let me see that phone. She watched the video twice, then straightened her jacket. Good, good. Dad looked stricken. Vivian, that video shows you counting the cash from selling your classic car collection to invest in Blue Harbor, she finished. We have the bill of sale, remember? Dated and notarized. Understanding dawned on Dad's face. The money I gave Daryl to invest. Exactly, Mom smiled grimly. His attempt to frame you just proved the fraud. He documented his own crime. Agent Sarah appeared in the doorway. They're ready for us. The courtroom fell silent as we entered. Daryl and Marcus sat at the defense table, both in suits that couldn't quite hide their prison jumpsuits underneath. Daryl's eyes locked onto mine. I stared back, refusing to flinch. The proceedings moved quickly. Kylie testified first, detailing the money laundering operation. Then came the forensic accountants, the evidence from the warehouse, the forged documents. Finally, Mom stood for her victim impact statement. I trusted you, she began, looking directly at Daryl. We all did. You didn't just steal our money. You stole our faith in people, our sense of family. Her voice grew stronger. But here's what you didn't steal. Our strength, our truth, our ability to stand here today and make sure you never hurt another family again. Daryl's smug expression faltered. Oh, and that video you leaked this morning, Mom continued. Thank you for providing documented proof of exactly when and how you took our money. The prosecutors are especially grateful. Marcus cursed under his breath. Daryl's lawyer looked like he might be sick. The judge's verdict was swift and severe. 25 years for Daryl, 30 for Marcus. Full restitution ordered. As they led Daryl away, he called out, Bailey, wait! No, I cut him off. You don't get to speak to me anymore. Not ever again. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. "Mrs. Brooks," one called out, "how does it feel to know your husband orchestrated this entire fraud?" "Ex-husband," I corrected. "And it feels like justice." "Mr. and Mrs. Brooks," another asked my parents, "what about the video released this morning?" Dad stepped forward. "That video shows me selling my prized possessions to invest in what I thought was my son-in-law's legitimate business. Instead, that money funded his criminal enterprise. But today, justice was served." Back home, we gathered in the family room, the same room where this all started. But everything felt different now. "The FBI found most of the money," Seth announced, hanging up his phone. "It was hidden in accounts under the names of Daryl's shell companies. They're working on returning it." "All of it?" Dad asked. "Almost. Enough." Mom touched the divorce papers on the coffee table, signed, filed, and finally finished. "What now?" "Now," Adeline said, "we celebrate. You all deserve it." First, I picked up my phone. One last thing. I pulled up my social media and typed, "To anyone who's ever been gaslit, disbelieved, or manipulated, your truth matters. Stand strong. Justice is possible. Trust yourself." "Post it," Mom said softly. I did. The responses flooded in immediately. Messages of support, similar stories, offers of help. A community of strength rising from the ashes of betrayal. "Bailey," Dad called from the kitchen. "Come see this." On the TV, breaking news showed Marcus being led into another police car. The headline read, "New evidence links Blue Harbor suspects to 3 additional deaths." "It's really over," I breathed. "No," Mom corrected, putting her arm around me. "It's just beginning. We're stronger now, wiser." "And together," Seth added. My phone buzzed one last time, a message from an unknown number. But this time I didn't feel afraid. I deleted it without reading it. Whatever Daryl had left to say, whatever secrets were still hidden, they didn't matter anymore. We had our truth, our family, and our future. And that was everything.
I'm Naomi, and I grew up in a small house with my parents and older sister, Emma. Dad worked at the local factory, and Mom sold groceries at the supermarket down the street. We weren't rich, but we got by. That all changed when my grandparents on Dad's side passed away and left us some money and their house. The new house was bigger, in a nicer part of town. Mom quit her job to focus on the family, as she put it. But really, she focused on Emma. From the start, Emma was the star. She learned to read before kindergarten and zoomed through schoolwork like it was nothing. Teachers praised her smarts, but always had something to say about her restlessness and short temper. At home, it was all about Emma. Mom and Dad bent over backwards to make her comfortable, signing her up for every class and activity they could afford. "Emma's our ticket out of here," Mom would say, stars in her eyes. "She'll be the first in the family to go to college. She'll take care of us when we're old." And me? I was just there. "Naomi, you'll have to work hard to get by," Dad told me once, patting my head. "You're not special like your sister." Those words stung, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I threw myself into helping around the house. By 12, I could cook simple meals and do laundry better than Mom. As we got older, the divide between Emma and me grew. She blazed through high school, collecting awards and accolades. I did okay, mostly B's with a few A's, but it was never enough to turn their heads. The day Emma got her college acceptance letter, you'd think she'd won the lottery. Mom cried, Dad popped open a bottle of champagne, and Emma preened like a peacock. "Full ride to prestigious university," she bragged, waving the letter in my face. "Bet you can't top that, little sis." I forced a smile. "Congrats, Emma. You earned it." Later that night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Emma's words echoed in my head, "Bet you can't top that." And she was right. I couldn't. But maybe, just maybe, I could forge my own path. The day Emma left, I watched from my bedroom window as they loaded up the car. There were tears, hugs, and endless photos. Not once did anyone call for me to join them. The first few months after Emma left for college were strange. Mom and Dad orbited around her absence like lost satellites, constantly calling and messaging her. They'd gather around the phone, hanging on her every word about classes, new friends, and college life. Our little genius, Mom would coo after each call. She's going to change the world. I'd roll my eyes and retreat to my room or lose myself in housework. It was easier than listening to them gush about Emma's latest achievements. But then, something changed. The calls became less frequent. Emma's responses to texts grew shorter, sometimes just a terse "busy" or "later." I could see the worry lines deepening on Mom's face. About 6 months into Emma's freshman year, the bomb dropped. Mom was in the kitchen when her phone rang. Her face lit up when she saw it was Emma, but as she listened, her expression crumpled. "Emma, honey, what do you mean you're tired of us?" Mom's voice quavered. "We're your family." I don't understand. I pretended to be engrossed in my homework, but my ears were straining to catch every word. When Mom hung up, she looked shell-shocked. The next few months were tense. Emma's calls became rare, and when they did happen, they were short and cold. Then, one day, another bombshell hit. "She's lost her scholarship," Dad announced at dinner, his face ashen. "Emma's failed most of her classes. She says we need to pay for her tuition now." I nearly choked on my peas. "How much?" I asked, dreading the answer. When Dad named the figure, I thought he was joking. But the grim look on his face told me otherwise. "We'll have to take out a loan," Mom said, her voice trembling. "We can't let her drop out. She's so close to her dream." I wanted to scream. Their dream, not Emma's. But I kept my mouth shut and excused myself from the table. Over the next few months, I watched as my parents stretched themselves thin trying to keep Emma in college. They took out loans, cut back on expenses, and even dipped into their retirement savings. All for Emma, who seemed to grow more demanding with each passing day. It was during this time that they suddenly seemed to remember my existence. Mom started asking about my day, and Dad would inquire about my plans for the future. One evening, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "Naomi, honey, have you thought about college? There are some good state schools nearby." I raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly would we pay for that?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, we'd find a way. You're our only hope now." I nearly laughed at the irony. After years of being the afterthought, I was suddenly their only hope. But I wasn't about to jump through hoops for their approval now. "I'm planning to work after graduation," I said flatly. "College isn't for everyone." As my high school graduation approached, the pressure intensified. My parents, drowning in debt from Emma's failed college attempt, suddenly became obsessed with my future. "You could get scholarships," Dad insisted one night. "Your grades aren't bad." I sighed. "Dad, my grades are average at best. I'm not getting a free ride anywhere." "But you have to try," Mom chimed in. "We're counting on you, Naomi." Those words hit me like a slap. After years of neglect, they were counting on me? The audacity was breathtaking. So, I made a decision. The day after graduation, I started job hunting. I wasn't going to college, at least not yet. I needed to stand on my own 2 feet, away from the shadow of Emma's failures and my parents' misplaced expectations. My first job wasn't glamorous. I landed a position at a small advertising agency, mostly doing grunt work, filing papers, getting coffee, and occasionally sitting in on meetings. Every paycheck felt like a step towards independence. Meanwhile, the situation at home was growing more tense by the day. Emma had dropped out of college, leaving our parents with a mountain of debt and shattered dreams. And then came the next bombshell. I remember the day clearly. I had just gotten home from work when I heard raised voices from the living room. "Pregnant?" Mom's voice was shrill. "Emma, how could you be so irresponsible?" I peeked around the corner to see Emma, looking defiant as ever, facing off against our shell-shocked parents. "It's not a big deal," Emma said, rolling her eyes. "Tyler's loaded. His family will take care of everything." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emma had always been self-centered, but this was a new low. She was treating her pregnancy like a get-rich-quick scheme. Over the next few weeks, our house turned into a war zone. Mom and Dad were constantly on the phone, trying to reach Tyler's family. Emma lounged around, acting like a princess waiting for her prince to sweep her off her feet. And me? I was caught in the middle, trying to keep my head down and focus on my work. But of course, it couldn't last. One evening, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. "Naomi, sweetie," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "We need your help. Could you watch Emma's baby sometimes after it's born? Just for a few hours here and there?" I nearly dropped the plate I was washing. "What? Mom, I work full-time. I can't be a babysitter." Her face fell. "But we're family. We need to support each other. Emma's going through a tough time." I couldn't hold back anymore. "And whose fault is that? Emma made her choices. Why should I have to sacrifice my life for her mistakes?" The argument that followed was explosive. Years of pent-up resentment came pouring out. I told them everything, how neglected I'd felt, how unfair their treatment had been, how tired I was of being the family afterthought. By the end, we were all in tears. Mom and Dad looked stunned, like they were seeing me for the first time. Emma, who had wandered in halfway through, just stood there with her mouth hanging open. "I'm moving out," I announced, my voice shaky but determined. "I can't do this anymore. I need to live my own life." Within a week, I had found a small apartment and moved out. For the next few months, I threw myself into my work. The advertising agency became my second home. I volunteered for every project, stayed late to learn new skills, and slowly but surely, started climbing the ladder. Emma had her baby, a boy. Tyler's family agreed to support the child financially, but Tyler himself wanted nothing to do with Emma or the baby. Last I heard, she was still living at home, letting our parents raise her son while she tried to figure out her life. Years flew by at the advertising agency. I'd worked my way up from coffee runner to junior copywriter, but I hit a ceiling. My boss, Sarah, called me into her office one day. "Naomi, you've got talent," she said, leaning back in her chair. "But without a degree, I can't promote you further. Company policy." That night, I crunched numbers. It would be tough, but I could do it. I'd been saving, living frugally in my tiny apartment. With some sacrifices, I could afford part-time classes at the local college. For grueling years later, I stood in my cap and gown, diploma in hand. I'd done it. Bachelor's degree in marketing and communications, with honors. Sarah was there, beaming like a proud mom. "I knew you had it in you, kid," she said, hugging me. "There's a senior copywriter position with your name on it." My career took off like a rocket after that. I moved up to senior copywriter, then account manager. I was handling major clients, pitching big ideas. It was at a client mixer that I met Jack. He was smart, funny, and didn't take himself too seriously. We bonded over our shared love of cheesy 80s movies and terrible puns. Before I knew it, we were dating. A year flew by, and Jack proposed. It wasn't some grand gesture, just a quiet moment in our favorite park. It felt right. As we planned the wedding, I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. It was time to face my family. We drove up to the house, and Mom answered the door, her eyes widening in shock. "Naomi, is that really you?" Dad appeared behind her, looking older than I remembered. "Who's this?" he asked, eyeing Jack suspiciously. "This is Jack," I said, squeezing his hand. "My fiancé." You could have heard a pin drop in the silence that followed. Then, surprisingly, Mom burst into tears and hugged me. Dad shook Jack's hand, a bit too firmly. We settled in the living room, the air thick with unspoken words. Emma slouched in, a son on her hip. She looked tired, resentful. "So," Mom said, breaking the ice. "Tell us about yourself, Jack." As Jack chatted about his job in software development, I could see my parents' eyes light up. When I mentioned my degree and promotion, they practically glowed with pride. "Two college graduates in the family," Dad exclaimed. "Who would have thought?" Emma snorted from her corner. "Well, isn't this cozy?" The prodigal daughter returns, all successful and engaged. "So, what's the rush? Knocked up, are you?" The room went silent. Jack tensed beside me, but I put a hand on his arm. "I'd handle this." "Actually, Emma," I said, keeping my voice level, "Jack and I are getting married because we love each other and want to spend our lives together. We're planning for kids, sure, but only after we're financially stable and can provide them with a good life. You know, responsible family planning? You might want to look into it." Emma's face turned red. Mom gasped. Dad coughed awkwardly. "Well," Jack said, breaking the tension. "Who wants to see pictures of the venue?" The year leading up to the wedding was a whirlwind of planning, decisions, and, unfortunately, family drama. Jack and I had decided on a simple but elegant affair, nothing too extravagant. We wanted a day that reflected us, not some over-the-top production. My parents, however, had other ideas. "Naomi, dear," Mom said during one of our rare phone calls. "Don't you think we should be more involved in the planning? After all, it's not every day our daughter gets married." I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. "Mom, Jack and I have got this under control. We're adults, remember?" These conversations became a regular occurrence. Dad would call, complaining that they felt left out. Mom would text, asking why I didn't want their input. It was exhausting. Then came Emma's offer. She cornered me one day when I was at my parents' house, dropping off some wedding invitations. "Hey, sis," she said, sidling up to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I was thinking, I've got loads of free time. Why don't I help you with the wedding planning? Something in her expression made my skin crawl. It was the same look she used to get when we were kids, right before she'd do something to get me in trouble. "Thanks, Emma," I said, carefully keeping my voice neutral. "But Jack and I have got it covered." Her face fell, but I caught a flash of, was that malice? "Oh come on, Naomi. Don't be like that. Can't you see I'm trying here?" I stood firm. "I appreciate the offer, but really, we're good." Of course, my parents got involved after that. The guilt trips started coming thick and fast. "Naomi, your sister was only trying to help," Mom scolded over the phone. "You could at least try to meet her halfway." Dad was more blunt. "You're tearing this family apart with your stubbornness," he growled. "Is that what you want?" I wanted to scream. How was I the one tearing the family apart? Weren't they the ones who had played favorites all these years? Weren't they the ones who had pushed me away? But I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "Look," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This is my wedding, mine and Jack's. I love you guys, but I'm not going to let you or Emma hijack my wedding. It's not up for discussion." I threw myself into the wedding preparations with renewed vigor. Every decision, from the flower arrangements to the seating chart, was made with care and purpose. This wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a statement. A declaration of independence. 2 weeks before the wedding, my world turned upside down. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when my phone rang. Aunt Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Naomi, honey," she said, her voice hesitant. "There's something you need to know." My stomach dropped as she spoke. Emma, my dear sister, had decided to hold her engagement party on my wedding day. The very same day. I thanked her numbly and hung up. For a moment, I just sat there, stunned. Then, anger surged through me like wildfire. Before I knew it, I was in my car, speeding towards my parents' house. I burst through the front door without knocking. "Emma, where is she?" I demanded, my voice echoing through the house. Mom appeared from the kitchen, looking flustered. "She's out." "Naomi, what's going on?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "What's going on?" "Oh, I don't know. Maybe the fact that my dear sister is planning her engagement party on my wedding day." The color drained from my parents' faces. They exchanged a guilty look that told me everything I needed to know. "You knew," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You knew and you didn't tell me." "Now, Naomi," Dad began, his hands raised placatingly. "It's not what you think. It just happened to fall on the same day. Pure coincidence." "Coincidence?" I spat the word out like it was poison. "There are 365 days in a year, and she just happens to pick my wedding day?" Mom stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "Sweetie, we can make it work. We'll go to Emma's engagement in the morning, and then come to your wedding in the afternoon. It'll be a day of double celebration." I stared at them, incredulous. Years of pent-up resentment and hurt came bubbling to the surface. "Do you hear yourselves?" I asked, my voice shaking. "After everything, all the years of favoritism, all the times you put Emma first, you're still doing it. On my wedding day." "That's not fair, Naomi," Dad protested weakly. "Not fair?" I laughed again, tears pricking at my eyes. "You want to talk about not fair? How about growing up feeling like I was invisible in my own home? How about watching you bend over backwards for Emma while I had to fend for myself? How about the fact that even now, when I'm finally happy, she has to try and ruin it?" My parents stood there, shocked into silence. For the first time, I saw something like realization dawning in their eyes. "I'm done," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'm done competing for your attention. I'm done being the afterthought. You have a choice to make. You can come to my wedding, my whole wedding, not just part of it, or you can go to Emma's engagement. But you can't do both." With that, I turned and walked out, leaving them standing in stunned silence. I spent the evening drafting a polite but firm email to all our guests, explaining that due to unforeseen circumstances, I needed to confirm attendance. I didn't mention Emma or her engagement. I didn't need to air our family drama to everyone. Over the next few days, responses trickled in. To my relief and gratitude, most of our guests confirmed they would be at our wedding. But there was still a knot of anxiety in my stomach. My parents hadn't responded. The morning of my wedding day dawned bright and clear. As the time for the ceremony approached, I waited nervously in the bridal suite, expecting, hoping, to hear my parents' voices. But they didn't come. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't going to be there to walk me down the aisle. Just as panic started to set in, there was a knock at the door. My best friend Lisa opened it to reveal my Uncle Robert, my dad's brother. "Naomi," he said, his eyes tearing up as he saw me. "You look beautiful, sweetheart." "Uncle Robert," I choked out, fighting back tears. "They're not coming, are they?" He shook his head sadly. "I'm so sorry, honey. But listen, if you'll have me, I'd be honored to walk you down the aisle." With Uncle Robert by my side, I made my way down the aisle. Jack's face when he saw me made all the stress and drama fade away. In that moment, it was just us. After the ceremony, as guests mingled during the cocktail hour, I pulled aside one of the venue's security guards. "If anyone tries to come in late," I said, my voice firm, "don't let them in. No exceptions." I rejoined the party, determined to enjoy every moment. And I did. Surrounded by friends and family who had chosen to be there for us, I felt loved and supported. But then, as I was chatting with some college friends, I saw a commotion near the entrance. My heart sank as I recognized the voices. "Let us in. Our daughter is getting married." My mother's shrill voice carried across the room. "We're the parents of the bride. We have every right to be here." My father's angry tones joined in. I excused myself and made my way closer, staying out of sight. Through the glass doors, I could see them, my parents, Emma, and a man I assumed was her fiancé. They were arguing with the security guard, gesticulating wildly. "This is our daughter's wedding," Dad yelled, his face red with anger. "We're practically the hosts here." The security guard, to his credit, stood firm. "I'm sorry, sir, but I have strict instructions not to allow any late guests. No exceptions." Emma pushed forward, her face twisted in a sneer. "Oh, I bet this was Naomi's idea. Always so dramatic." I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see Jack. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded, turning back to the scene. My parents were now threatening the guard, saying they'd call the police, that they'd sue the venue. It was embarrassing and heartbreaking all at once. Just then, my mother spotted me through the glass. Her eyes widened, and she started waving frantically, calling my name. My father and Emma joined in, all of them making a spectacle of themselves. I looked at them for a long moment, taking in the sight of my family, the people who were supposed to love and support me unconditionally, making a scene at my wedding. Then, with a calm I didn't know I possessed, I turned my back on them and walked away. "Come on," I said to Jack, taking his hand. "Let's go cut the cake. We have a marriage to celebrate." As we walked back to our guests, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I had truly put myself first. It hurt, yes, but it also felt right. This was my day, my life, my choice. The days following the wedding were a blissful blur. It was a sunny Tuesday afternoon when my phone rang. Mom's name flashed on the screen, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Hello?" "Naomi," Mom's voice came through, tight with barely contained anger. "We need to talk about what happened at your wedding. Your own parents. And Emma. We raised you better than this. We never expected such attitude and neglect from you. Are you quite finished?" I asked calmly when she paused for breath. "No, I am not," she snapped. "We're waiting for an official apology from you. You need to recognize your mistake and make this right." This time, I couldn't hold back my laughter. It bubbled up from deep inside me, years of pent-up frustration finding release. "Naomi," Mom gasped, sounding scandalized. "This is no laughing matter." I took a deep breath, composing myself. "You're right, Mom. It's not funny. It's sad. Sad that you still can't see how you've hurt me. Sad that you think I owe you an apology when you couldn't even be bothered to show up to my wedding. But Emma's engagement was on the same day by her choice," I cut in. "And you chose her, again, like you always have." There was a long pause. When Mom spoke again, her voice was smaller, uncertain. "Naomi, we're your parents. You can't just cut us out of your life." "Watch me," I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. "I'm not going to apologize, Mom. And I'm not going to communicate with people who didn't even take the time to congratulate their daughter on her wedding day." I stood there for a moment, phone in hand, feeling a strange mix of sadness and liberation. Then I felt arms wrap around me from behind. "You okay?" Jack asked, resting his chin on my shoulder. I leaned back into him, smiling. "Yeah, I think I am. Better than okay, actually." And I meant it. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. Free from the expectations, the comparisons, the constant feeling of not being enough. In the months that followed, life settled into a new, wonderful rhythm. Jack and I threw ourselves into our careers, saving up for our dream home. Our evenings were filled with house hunting, planning for the future, and simply enjoying each other's company. Work was going better than ever. Without the constant drain of family drama, I found myself more focused, more creative. I landed a big account that put me in line for a promotion. As for my family, I stayed true to my word. I didn't call, didn't write, didn't check in. It was hard at times, especially during holidays, but Jack's family welcomed me with open arms, showing me what unconditional love and support really looked like. I guess you could say I had a pretty normal childhood, at least on the surface. Mom and Dad both worked office jobs, nothing fancy, but enough to keep us comfortable in our little suburban house. I was born first, and 2 years later, my sister Sophia came along. That's when everything changed, though I didn't realize it at the time. I remember the day Sophia started school. Mom was bustling around the kitchen, humming to herself as she packed Sophia's lunch. "Look, sweetie," she cooed, holding up a heart-shaped sandwich. "And I put a special note in there for you too." Sophia giggled, her pigtails bouncing as she admired her fancy lunch. I glanced down at my own lunchbox, filled with yesterday's leftovers, and felt a twinge in my stomach. "Mom," I said hesitantly, "can I have a heart sandwich too?" She barely looked at me. "Oh, Evelyn, don't be silly. You're too old for that now. Besides, we're out of bread." I wanted to point out that she'd just used bread for Sophia's lunch, but I kept quiet. It wasn't worth the argument. That was just the beginning. As we grew older, the pattern became clearer. Every time Sophia had a school event, Mom was front and center, camera in hand, cheering louder than any other parent. But when it came to my stuff, half the time, she didn't even show up. One day, I was scrolling through Mom's Facebook page when I noticed something weird. It was like a shrine to Sophia, photos of her at dance recitals, holding up spelling bee trophies, posing in new outfits. I had to scroll for ages before I found a picture of myself, and even then, I was half cropped out, blurry in the background. "Mom," I called out, my voice shaking a little. "How come there are so many pictures of Sophia on your page, but hardly any of me?" She glanced over, frowning slightly. "Oh, don't be so sensitive, Evelyn. Sophia's just more photogenic, that's all." I felt like I'd been slapped. More photogenic? Was that code for prettier? For better? Dad must have noticed something was up, because that evening, he surprised me with an ice cream trip. "Just you and me, kiddo," he said, ruffling my hair. "What flavor do you want?" For a while, these little outings with Dad were my lifeline. He'd bring me small gifts, or take me for drives, just the two of us. As the years rolled by, Dad's attempts to even things out became fewer and farther between. I'd catch him sometimes, watching Mom fuss over Sophia with this defeated look in his eyes. It was like he'd given up, you know? After that, things got even worse. Mom's favoritism went into overdrive, and Dad, well, he just checked out. I remember the day Sophia announced she wanted to learn piano. Mom's eyes lit up like it was Christmas. "Oh, darling, that's wonderful," she gushed. "We'll get you the best tutor in town." Next thing I knew, there was a shiny grand piano in our living room, and Sophia was having lessons twice a week. A few days later, I worked up the courage to ask for some new art supplies. My old ones were practically falling apart. "Art supplies?" Mom scoffed, rolling her eyes. "Evelyn, do you have any idea how expensive Sophia's piano lessons are? We can't afford to indulge every little whim." I felt my cheeks burning. "It's not a whim, Mom. I've been into art for years." "Well, maybe you should find a cheaper hobby," she snapped. I retreated to my room, fighting back tears. It wasn't fair. Nothing about this was fair. The differences extended to everything, even our clothes. Sophia's closet looked like a boutique, all designer labels and trendy pieces. Meanwhile, I was stuck with hand-me-downs and whatever I could find on clearance. One day, as I was rifling through a bin of marked-down shirts, Sophia appeared at my side. "Hey, Ev," she said softly. "I got some birthday money from Grandma. Want to split it and get you something nice?" I looked at her, surprised. "You don't have to do that, soft." She shrugged. "I want to. Besides, that green sweater you've been eyeing would look way better on you than me." That was Sophia for you. Despite everything, she was genuinely kind. It wasn't her fault Mom played favorites, and I couldn't bring myself to resent her for it. In fact, as we got older, Sophia and I grew closer. We'd stay up late, whispering about Mom's weird behavior. "I don't get it," Sophia confessed one night. "Why does she treat us so differently?" I shook my head. "I wish I knew, Sophia. I really wish I knew." There were times when Sophia would stand up for me, too. Like when Mom criticized my grades, conveniently forgetting that I was taking advanced classes. "Mom, lay off," Sophia snapped. "Evelyn's working her butt off. You should be proud." Mom looked shocked, then muttered something about Sophia being too soft-hearted. It was moments like these that kept me going. Knowing that at least my sister saw me, really saw me, made the rest of it a little more bearable. Another bright spot in all this mess was my grandparents, Eleanor and George. Every visit to their cozy little house felt like stepping into a different world, one where I actually mattered. Their walls told a different story than Mom's Facebook page. Photos of Sophia and me hung side by side, our gap-toothed grins immortalized in matching frames. One afternoon, as I helped Grandma in the kitchen, I couldn't help but ask, "How come you have so many pictures of me, Grandma?" "Mom barely has any." Grandma's hand stilled on the dough she was kneading. "Oh, sweetie," she sighed. "Your mother, well, she's always been a bit particular. But don't you ever think that means you're any less special?" Meanwhile, Grandpa George's workshop became my sanctuary. The smell of sawdust and varnish, the quiet whir of his lathe, it all felt more like home than my actual house did. Hours would fly by as he taught me to sand, to measure, to create something beautiful out of raw wood. As high school graduation approached, I dared to hope things might change. Maybe Mom would finally see me, be proud of me. But instead, she and Dad dropped a bombshell that left me reeling. "Girls," Dad said, his voice heavy, "your mother and I, we can't afford to pay for both of you to go to college." The room spun. I felt like I couldn't breathe. What do you mean?" Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's just not in our budget, Evelyn. You'll have to figure something out." I stumbled out of the house, barely aware of where I was going until I found myself on my grandparents' doorstep, sobbing. "Oh, honey," Grandma said, pulling me close. "What happened?" Through hiccuping breaths, I told them everything. When I finished, Grandpa and Grandma exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. "Evelyn," Grandpa said slowly, "how would you feel if we paid for your first 2 years of college?" I blinked, sure I'd heard wrong. You'd do that?" Grandma squeezed my hand. "Of course we would, sweetheart. We believe in you." For the first time in what felt like forever, a spark of hope flickered in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, I could make this work. With my grandparents' help, I managed to enroll in a public college a few hours away from home. Packing up my beat-up Honda Civic, I felt a mix of excitement and terror. This was my chance to start fresh, to be more than just the less favored daughter. As I drove away, watching my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror, I made a promise to myself, I was going to make this work, no matter what. Those first 2 years flew by in a blur of classes, new friends, and the intoxicating feeling of freedom. But as my grandparents' funding neared its end, reality came crashing back. I picked up every job I could find. Mornings, I'd sling lattes at the campus coffee shop, my hands perpetually smelling of espresso. Afternoons were split between shelving books at the library and tutoring freshmen who looked at calculus like it was written in alien hieroglyphics. "Evelyn, when's the last time you slept?" my roommate, Jen, asked one night as I stumbled in at 2 a.m. I shrugged, cracking open an energy drink. "Sleep's for the weak. I've got a paper due." It wasn't easy. There were nights I'd dinner on whatever I could scrounge from the vending machines, a bag of chips here, a granola bar there. But every time I thought about quitting, I'd remember my mom's dismissive words, and it would light a fire under me. I was halfway through my junior year when I got a call from Sophia. Her voice was tight, hesitant. "Ev, you sitting down?" My stomach dropped. "What's wrong? Is it Grandma and Grandpa?" No, they're fine, she rushed to assure me. It's about college. What she told me next made my blood run cold. Not only had our parents found money for Sophia's education, but they'd sent her to Wellesley, one of the most expensive private colleges in the country. I'm so sorry, Ev, Sophia sobbed. I had no idea. I'll drop out, I swear. It's not fair. Don't you dare, I cut her off, my voice sharper than I intended. This isn't your fault, Sophia. You deserve a good education. But so do you, she protested. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. Yeah, well, looks like I'm getting one the hard way. Promise me you'll stay in school, okay? After we hung up, I sat on my bed, staring at nothing. All those years of favoritism, and I'd still somehow believed there was a limit. That when it came to something as important as our futures, our parents would treat us equally. Stupid, naive Evelyn. I don't know how long I sat there, but eventually, I got up, washed my face, and headed to my shift at the coffee shop. As I tied on my apron, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, eyes bloodshot, hair a mess, but chin held high. All right, Evelyn, I muttered to my reflection. Time to prove them wrong. The morning after Sophia's call, I dragged myself out of bed, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. As I mindlessly scrolled through my phone, my mom's latest Facebook post stopped me cold. So proud of my talented youngest. Off to the best college because she actually applied herself, unlike some. Proud mom gifted child. My hand shook so bad I nearly dropped my phone. I read it again, and again, each word cutting deeper than the last. The implication was crystal clear, Sophia deserved the best, because she was talented. And me? I was just, what? A disappointment? Before I knew what I was doing, I was dialing Mom's number, my breath coming in short, angry gasps. Hello? Her voice was annoyingly chirper. What the hell, Mom? I spat out. Your Facebook post? Really? There was a pause, then a sigh. Oh, Evelyn, don't tell me you're jealous of your sister's success. Jealous? I nearly screamed. You lied to me. You said you couldn't afford college for both of us. Well, she said, her tone dripping with condescension, talent needs to be nurtured, while mediocrity will cope on its own. The words hit me like a slap. Mediocrity? Is that what you think of me? Now, don't be dramatic, she huffed. If you'd shown any real promise. I cut her off, years of pent-up hurt and anger pouring out. Real promise? I busted my ass in school. I'm working 3 jobs to stay in college. How is that not showing promise? Oh please, she scoffed. Working as a barista isn't exactly setting the world on fire, is it? We went back and forth, voices rising, until I was shouting and she was coldly dismissive. Finally, I hung up, my whole body shaking. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Dad. Evelyn, he said, his voice stern. What's this I hear about you yelling at your mother? I felt a flicker of hope. Surely Dad would see reason. Dad, did you see Mom's post? Did she tell you what she said to me? But my hope was quickly crushed. Your mother is very upset. She's not feeling well because of your call. How could you be so ungrateful? Always causing problems. Ungrateful? I cut in, disbelief coloring my voice. Dad, you lied to us. You said you couldn't afford college for both of us, but you're sending Sophia to Wellesley. There was a pause, and for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, he was seeing my side. But then, your mother, she had some savings. For emergencies. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. For emergencies? And my education wasn't an emergency? I hung up, then turned off my phone. Sinking to the floor, I hugged my knees to my chest, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. Dad had always been my ally, the one who tried to make things a little more fair. But now? Now he was just another person who saw me as less than. Less talented, less worthy, less everything. Life went on, but the weight of my parents' betrayal hung heavy on my shoulders. I threw myself into work and study, barely allowing myself time to breathe, let alone think about my family drama. One night, exhausted from a double shift at the coffee shop, I collapsed onto my worn-out couch and mindlessly flipped through TV channels. That's when I stumbled upon this trashy show about family secrets and hidden parentage. Tonight on Family Secrets Exposed, the overly dramatic narrator intoned, we uncover the shocking truth behind one woman's lifelong struggle with maternal rejection. I snorted, about to change the channel, when the story caught my attention. This woman, let's call her Jane, had always felt like an outsider in her family. Her mother doted on her younger sister while treating Jane with cold indifference. Sound familiar? But then came the twist. Jane discovered she was adopted. Suddenly, everything made sense to her. Her mother's favoritism, her father's emotional distance. I sat up straight, my heart pounding. A wild, crazy thought wormed its way into my brain. What if? No, it couldn't be, could it? But the more I thought about it, the more it seemed to fit. Mom's blatant favoritism, Dad's gradual withdrawal, the constant feeling that I just didn't belong. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was Googling at-home DNA tests. My fingers shook as I placed the order, a mix of fear and anticipation coursing through me. When the kit arrived, I realized I had a problem. I needed samples from my parents, and there was no way they'd willingly participate. That's when I decided to loop in the one person I could trust, Sophia. You want me to what? Sophia exclaimed when I called her with my plan. I know it sounds crazy, I admitted. But Soph, don't you want to know the truth? There was a long pause. Okay, she finally said. I'm in. But if we get caught, I'm blaming you. It took some creative maneuvering on Sophia's part. She managed to snag a few of Mom's hairs from her hairbrush and swabbed the rim of Dad's coffee mug, but we got the samples. Then came the agonizing wait for results. When the email finally arrived, my hands were shaking so bad I could barely click on it. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the revelation that I was adopted, that I wasn't really part of this family. But the truth was far more shocking than I could have ever imagined. I was indeed my parents' biological child. But Sophia? She only shared DNA with our mother. Not our father. My mind reeled. Sophia wasn't adopted, she was my half-sister. I must have read the results a dozen times, trying to make sense of it. How was this possible? Did Mom have an affair? Did Dad know? I was still staring at my screen in shock when my phone buzzed. It was Sophia. Ev, did you get the results? What did they say? I swallowed hard. Soph, I think you should come over. There's something you need to see. An hour later, Sophia was sitting beside me on my lumpy couch, her face pale as she looked at the test results. This can't be right, she whispered. There must be some mistake. I shook my head. I don't think so, Sophia. Look at the confidence levels. It's pretty definitive. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. But that would mean that Mom had an affair, I finished for her. Yeah. We sat in stunned silence for a long while, the implications of this discovery sinking in. Everything we thought we knew about our family, about ourselves, had just been turned upside down. After the DNA test bombshell, I was a mess. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. The weight of this secret was crushing me. I decided not to tell Dad. I mean, how do you even start that conversation? Hey Dad, guess what? Your precious Sophia isn't actually your kid. Yeah, right. But fate, it seems, had other plans. It was a regular Tuesday when my phone rang. Seeing Grandma Eleanor's name pop up, I felt a flicker of warmth. At least I still had my grandparents. Evelyn, sweetheart, Grandma's voice was tight with worry. There's something you need to know. Your mother, she came to see us yesterday. She asked us to change our will. To disinherit you in favor of Sophia. We refused, of course. But Evelyn, what's going on? As I filled her in on everything, the favoritism, the college money lies, the DNA test, Grandma listened in shocked silence. "Oh, Evelyn," she finally said. "I'm so sorry. We had no idea it was this bad." I wiped away tears I hadn't realized I'd been crying. "Thanks, Grandma. For telling me. And for not giving up on me." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, my mind racing. This was the last straw. No more secrets, no more lies. It was time for the truth to come out. As Christmas approached, I steeled myself for what I knew I had to do. When Sophia called to awkwardly explain that Mom and Dad were just having a small family dinner this year, I knew it was now or never. I drove home unannounced, my heart pounding as I pulled into the driveway. Through the window, I could see them all gathered around the dinner table: Mom, Dad, Sophia, even Dad's best friend Tom. The perfect little family, huh? I burst through the door, the cheerful Christmas music providing a surreal backdrop to the drama about to unfold. Mom's face darkened as soon as she saw me. "Evelyn, what are you doing here? Your behavior lately has been absolutely unacceptable. The way you spoke to me on the phone, the trouble you've been causing." "Trouble?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, that's rich coming from you. Tell me, Mom, how long have you been lying to all of us?" The room fell silent. Dad looked confused, Sophia pale and scared. Tom shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "What are you talking about?" Dad asked. I took a deep breath. "I had a DNA test done." "Dad, I'm so sorry, but Sophia isn't your daughter." The room erupted. Dad jumped to his feet, his face a mask of shock and rage. Sophia burst into tears. "And Mom?" Mom just crumpled, sinking into her chair with a wail. "Sarah," Dad's voice was barely a whisper. "Is this true?" Through her tears, Mom nodded. "I'm sorry, Michael. I'm so sorry. It just happened. Tom and we've been in love for years. I never meant for it to go this far, but when I got pregnant with Sophia." Tom stood up, his face ashen. "Michael, I can explain." Dad's fist connected with Tom's jaw before he could finish, sending him sprawling. As chaos reigned, I caught Sophia's eye across the room. She looked lost, broken. I wanted to go to her, to tell her this didn't change anything between us, but before I could move, Mom's voice cut through the noise. "I've always loved Tom," she sobbed. "And I couldn't help but love Sophia more. She was a product of that love." Evelyn. Evelyn was a reminder of a marriage I never wanted. The fallout from that fateful Christmas dinner was nothing short of nuclear. In the weeks that followed, our family imploded in spectacular fashion. Dad, reeling from the double betrayal of Mom and his supposed best friend, went on the warpath. He filed for divorce faster than you could say infidelity and came after both Mom and Tom for every penny he could get. I'll never forget the day he called me to his lawyer's office. "Evelyn," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I want you to have this." He slid a check across the table, and I nearly choked when I saw the amount. "Dad, I can't." He held up a hand. "You deserve it, kiddo. After everything, well, it's the least I can do." I used that money to pay off my student loans, and even put a down payment on a small condo. For the first time in my life, I felt financially secure. Sophia, bless her heart, was a trooper through it all. She dropped out of Wellesley, saying she couldn't stomach being there knowing how it was paid for. "I'm going to do this on my own terms," she told me over coffee one day. "No more lies, no more handouts." I watched with pride as she got a job waiting tables and enrolled in community college. She was determined to forge her own path, and I admired her all the more for it. As for Mom, well, that's a wound that's still raw. Dad, the grandparents, and I cut ties completely. It wasn't easy, but after years of manipulation and lies, it felt necessary for our own mental health. Sophia still talks to her occasionally. "She's still our mom," she said to me once, her voice small. Even if she's a pretty crappy one. I nodded, understanding, but not quite agreeing. For me, the mother I thought I knew had died the day the truth came out. Months passed, and slowly, we all began to find our footing in this new reality. Dad started dating again, tentatively. He and I grew closer than ever, bonding over our shared hurt and healing. Sophia and I? We became inseparable. All those years of Mom's favoritism driving a wedge between us melted away. We were sisters, through and through, regardless of DNA. One evening, as Sophia and I sat on the balcony of my new condo, sharing a bottle of wine, I found myself reflecting on everything we'd been through. You know, I said, swirling the wine in my glass, a part of me almost wants to thank Mom. If she hadn't been so awful, we might never have uncovered the truth. And as painful as it's been, I don't know. I feel like I know who I am now, you know? Sophia nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that. It's like, the fog has lifted. So, what's next for Evelyn 2.0? I laughed. God, I don't know. Finish my degree, I guess. Maybe travel a bit. The world's wide open. And it was. For the first time in my life, I felt truly free. The weight of trying to earn Mom's love, of competing with Sophia, of never feeling good enough, it was all gone. My name is Rebecca, and it all began when I was just 7 years old, the year my parents decided to divorce. Mom and Dad, bless their hearts, came up with what they thought was the perfect solution. They agreed I'd live with each of them in turns. At the time, it seemed ideal. I'd get to spend time with both parents, and neither would feel left out. My dad, always the entrepreneur, had his own successful business. This allowed him the flexibility to take time off whenever it was his turn to have me. We'd hop in his car and hit the road, exploring nearby cities and creating memories I'll cherish forever. Those trips with Dad were magical. We'd visit museums, try local cuisines, and sometimes just drive aimlessly, singing along to the radio at the top of our lungs. It was during these moments that I felt closest to him, like we were the only two people in the world. When it was Mom's turn, life was different, but equally enjoyable. She lived with my grandparents, and their house was always filled with warmth and laughter. Grandma would bake cookies, filling the air with the scent of vanilla and cinnamon, while Grandpa regaled me with stories from his youth. For a while, this back-and-forth life seemed perfect. I had the best of both worlds, excitement with Dad and comfort with Mom. But as with most things in life, change was inevitable. It happened when I was about 9. Dad called me one evening when I was at Mom's place. His voice was a mix of nervousness and excitement. "Becky," he said, using the nickname only he used for me, "I've got some news. I've met someone special, and we're getting married." My heart raced. A stepmom? I didn't know how to feel about that. Would she like me? Would Dad still want to go on our trips? When I finally met Sarah, my new stepmother, she seemed nice enough. She smiled a lot and asked me questions about school and my hobbies. For a while, things were okay. She'd join Dad and me on some of our trips, and sometimes she'd even suggest fun activities for us to do together. As I entered my early teens, I noticed a shift in Sarah's behavior. She became increasingly preoccupied with the idea of having a baby. I'd often overhear hushed conversations between her and Dad, filled with words like fertility treatments and trying again. It was clear that Sarah desperately wanted a child of her own. One summer, when I was 14, I went off to sports camp. It was a chance to escape the growing tension at home and just be a kid for a while. The day before I left, Sarah pulled me aside. "Rebecca," she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement, "I have some news. I'm pregnant." I was genuinely happy for her and Dad. Maybe this would make everything better, I thought. I headed off to camp, looking forward to 2 weeks of fun and freedom. When I returned home, tanned and full of camp stories, everything seemed normal at first. Sarah was still excited about the pregnancy, and Dad seemed happier than he had been in a long time. I settled back into my routine, starting school again after the summer break. It was during a routine checkup at school, about 2 weeks after I'd returned from camp, that everything changed. The school nurse frowned as she examined me. "Rebecca, have you been feeling all right lately?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "You're showing symptoms of rubella. We'll need to do some tests to confirm." I didn't think much of it at the time. I felt fine, and I had no idea what rubella even was. But when the test results came back positive, suddenly everyone around me started panicking. Dad rushed me to the doctor, his face pale with worry. It was there that I learned the severity of the situation. Rubella, while usually mild in children, could be devastating for pregnant women and their unborn babies. My heart sank as I remembered Sarah's pregnancy. The doctor immediately ordered tests for her as well. The next few days were a blur of medical appointments and tense silences at home. Then came the devastating news. Sarah had contracted rubella from me. The doctors explained the high risk of birth defects and strongly recommended terminating the pregnancy. I watched helplessly as Sarah crumbled under the weight of this information. Sarah underwent the procedure to terminate the pregnancy. When she came home from the hospital, she was a shell of her former self. She barely spoke, spending most of her time in bed. I tried to apologize, to explain that I never meant for this to happen, but she wouldn't even look at me. One day, I overheard the doctor talking to Dad in hushed tones. "I'm sorry, but it seems the complications from the procedure have affected her ability to conceive. It's unlikely she'll be able to get pregnant again." Weeks turned into months, and Sarah's grief turned into something darker. She started lashing out, mostly at me. At first, it was just cold glares and cutting remarks. "If it weren't for you, I'd be holding my baby right now," she'd mutter under her breath. I tried to make myself scarce, to give her space to heal. But it didn't seem to help. The tension in the house was unbearable. The months following Sarah's devastating loss brought a chill to our home that no amount of heating could dispel. As I approached my 15th birthday, it became painfully clear that Sarah had made a decision. If she couldn't have children of her own, she would live solely for herself. And in this new life she envisioned, there was no room for me. The change was gradual at first, almost imperceptible. But soon, it became impossible to ignore. Whenever it was time for me to stay with Mom, Dad, and Sarah would suddenly announce grand travel plans. They'd jet off to exotic locations, filling their social media with pictures of beaches, museums, and fancy restaurants. These were the very same trips Dad used to take with me. Now, I was left behind, scrolling through their photos with a mixture of envy and hurt. When it was Dad's turn to have me, life became a twisted game of don't be seen, don't be heard. Sarah insisted that I spend most of my time in my room, taking care of myself. The house rules might as well have been carved in stone. No noise. No loud talking. No active games. No loud laughter. It was as if Sarah was allergic to joy, at least any joy that came from me. Every movement I made seemed to grate on her nerves. She demanded absolute obedience, treating me more like an unwelcome houseguest than family. Unable to bear it any longer, I finally broke down and told Mom everything during my next stay with her. I spilled out all the pain, the isolation, the constant walking on eggshells. Mom's reaction was explosive. She stormed over to Dad's house, her face flushed with anger. "How dare you let that woman treat our daughter this way?" she shouted at Dad. "If this doesn't stop, I'll take you to court. You'll lose all custody rights." The next day, Dad sat me down for a serious talk. My heart leapt. Finally, he was going to stand up for me, to set things right. But as he spoke, my hope turned to ash. "Becky," he began, his voice stern, "Sarah is trying her best. She only wants what's good for you. If you keep complaining like this, making up stories, it might reach a point where I won't be able to see you anymore. Is that what you want?" I felt like I'd been slapped. Not only was Dad not defending me, he was somehow twisting this to make it my fault. Tears stung my eyes as I shook my head. No, Dad. I don't want that. Good, he nodded, seemingly satisfied. Then let's not have any more of these complaints, okay? From that day forward, I stopped voicing my grievances. I decided to become the perfect, quiet, obedient stepdaughter Sarah wanted, anything to keep my relationship with Dad. But even my best efforts weren't enough. Sarah never missed an opportunity to remind me of the crime I had committed. If it weren't for you, she'd mutter, eyeing me with disdain, I'd have a child of my own now. Each accusation was a dagger to my heart. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to remind them that I was just a kid who didn't even know she was sick. But I swallowed my words, buried my pain deep inside. As I entered my late teens, my needs naturally grew. I needed a new smartphone to keep up with schoolwork and friends, and a laptop for my increasingly demanding assignments. Dad, to his credit, recognized these needs and bought them for me without hesitation. But Sarah, predictably, wasn't pleased. "John, you're spoiling her," I overheard her saying one day. "All this money you're wasting on her, it's ridiculous." "They're not luxuries, Sarah," Dad argued weakly. "She needs these things for school." But Sarah wasn't having it. "Well, if she needs so many expensive things, maybe I should take over managing her expenses. I'll show you how to save money." And just like that, my wardrobe became Sarah's new project. Gone were the days of picking out my own clothes or getting anything new. Sarah scoured second-hand websites and sales, bringing home-used clothes and shoes that often didn't fit right or match my style. "Children grow so fast," she'd say with a saccharine smile. "It's not worth spending much on things you'll outgrow in no time." The irony wasn't lost on me. While I wore hand-me-downs and clearance items, Sarah's closet was a parade of designer labels. She'd spend hours carefully curating her outfits, always dressed in the latest fashions, her arms laden with branded bags. As high school graduation approached, a glimmer of hope appeared. Dad promised to buy me a car, a symbol of freedom and independence that I desperately craved. For weeks, I daydreamed about the possibilities, researching models and imagining myself driving off to college. But, as with everything in Dad's house, Sarah had other plans. "A car," she screeched when Dad mentioned it. "John, that's absurd. Do you know how expensive cars are to maintain? Besides, I need a new car. Mine is almost 3 years old." I listened from the top of the stairs, my heart sinking with each word. I knew what was coming next. "And don't forget," Sarah continued, her voice sickly sweet, "Rebecca will be off to college soon. That's going to be a huge expense. We can't afford to buy her a car too." The next day, Dad sat me down, his expression a mix of guilt and resignation. "Becky, about the car," he began. I cut him off, forcing a smile. "It's okay, Dad. I understand. College is expensive, and I appreciate that you're willing to pay for it." Relief washed over his face. "That's right. Any college you want, and we'll cover accommodation too." "That's better than a car, right?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Once again, Sarah had won, and once again, I was left to swallow my disappointment. As my high school graduation approached, I threw myself into researching colleges. I wanted to find the perfect balance, a school with a strong program in my field of interest, not too far from home, but far enough to give me some independence. After weeks of careful consideration, I finally found it, a well-respected university about 2 hours away. Excited, I showed Dad the brochure, pointing out the excellent facilities and curriculum. "What do you think, Dad? It seems perfect." Before Dad could respond, Sarah snatched the brochure from my hands, her eyes widening as she saw the tuition fees. "Are you out of your mind?" she shrieked, waving the brochure in Dad's face. "This is highway robbery. We can't afford this." "But Sarah," Dad started, "we promised Becky we'd pay for her college." Sarah wasn't listening. She stormed off, returning moments later with her laptop. "Look," she said, shoving the screen at Dad. "This college is much more reasonable. And it's further away, it'll teach her some real independence." I felt my dreams crumbling as I watched Dad's resolve weaken. "Maybe Sarah has a point, Becky," he said, not meeting my eyes. "This other school looks good too, and it would be easier on our finances." Once again, I swallowed my disappointment and nodded, knowing that arguing would be futile. In the end, I enrolled in Sarah's chosen college, miles away from everything and everyone I knew. The years at college passed in a blur of classes, new friendships, and self-discovery. During holidays, I'd return home, always to Mom's house, where I was welcomed with open arms and the comfort of unconditional love. It was during one such break, as I was settling back into my old room at Mom's, that my phone rang. It was Dad. "Becky," he said, his voice a mix of hurt and accusation, "I heard you were back in town. Why haven't you come to see us? We've moved to a new house, bigger, in a better neighborhood. We're having a housewarming party tomorrow night. I want you to come." The next evening, I stood nervously on the porch of a large, impressive house, clutching a carefully chosen housewarming gift. I rang the doorbell, plastering on a smile. The door swung open, and there stood Sarah. Her eyes narrowed as she saw me, her lips curling into a sneer. "What are you doing here?" she hissed. "You weren't invited." Before I could respond, she snatched the gift from my hands and tossed it unceremoniously into a nearby trash can. "We don't need your cheap presents," she spat. And with that, she slammed the door in my face. I stood there, stunned, my ears ringing with the echo of the slamming door. I never saw Dad. He never saw me. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses drifted through the windows, a party in full swing that I wasn't welcome to join. Humiliated and hurt beyond words, I turned and walked away, tears blurring my vision. I made my way back to Mom's house, my mind a whirlwind of confusion and pain. "How was the party, sweetie?" Mom asked as I walked in. "I didn't go," I lied, forcing a weak smile. "Got a bad headache. Think I'll just go lie down." That evening, as I lay in my childhood bed at Mom's house, my phone buzzed. It was Dad. My stomach clenched as I answered. "Becky, why didn't you come to the housewarming party?" His voice was a mixture of hurt and anger. "We waited for you." I took a deep breath, deciding that it was finally time for the truth. "Dad, I did come." Sarah answered the door. She said I wasn't invited, threw away my gift, and slammed the door in my face. There was a long pause, and for a moment, I dared to hope he'd believe me. But then, "How dare you try to denigrate Sarah like this?" Dad's voice trembled with fury. "She would never do such a thing. I can't believe you'd make up such horrible lies about your stepmother." His words cut deep, reopening old wounds. "Dad, I'm not lying." "Why would I?" "Enough," he interrupted. "I don't want to hear any more of your excuses. When you're ready to apologize to Sarah, you can come see us." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, tears streaming down my face. It was clear now, Dad would always choose Sarah over me. The years that followed were a delicate dance of avoidance and brief, tense encounters. I graduated college, found a job, and built a life for myself. On the rare occasions I saw Dad, it was always on neutral ground, a cafe, a park, never at his house. Then, like a ray of sunshine breaking through storm clouds, I met Michael. He was a few years older, kind, and understanding. We worked for the same company, and what started as coffee breaks turned into dates, then a relationship. After 2 years together, he proposed, and I joyfully accepted. As we planned our wedding, I agonized over the guest list. In the end, I sent an invitation to Dad, and only Dad. I couldn't bring myself to invite Sarah, not after everything. The phone call came 3 days later. Dad was livid. "Rebecca," he barked, using my full name, "how could you do this? How could you exclude Sarah from your wedding? After all she's done for you, all the love and care she's given you over the years? This is a slap in the face." Something in me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and hurt came pouring out. I reminded him of everything, the second-hand clothes, the rejection of the car, the choice of a cheap college, and the gift thrown in the trash. There was silence on the other end of the line. When Dad finally spoke, his voice was small, almost unrecognizable. "I'm so sorry," Dad whispered. "I've been a terrible father. I put Sarah first, and I shouldn't have. Can you ever forgive me?" His words, so long awaited, washed over me. I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. "It's not going to be easy, Dad," I said honestly. "We have a lot to work through." "I know," he replied. "But I want to try. Please, let me walk you down the aisle. I'll come alone, I promise. Just give me a chance to make things right." As I ended the call, I felt a mix of emotions: hope, trepidation, a cautious optimism. Could this be the turning point I'd longed for? Could Dad and I rebuild our relationship? The day before my wedding dawned bright and clear. As I busied myself with last-minute preparations, my phone rang. It was Dad. My heart lifted for a moment, thinking he was calling with well wishes. How wrong I was. "Becky," his voice was strained, "I won't be able to come to the wedding tomorrow. It's Sarah, she's in the hospital." Her blood pressure skyrocketed. She's been so stressed about this wedding situation. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, This is your fault, you know," he cut me off. "If you had just invited her, if you hadn't been so selfish." "Selfish?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "Are you kidding me? I can't leave her alone in the hospital," Dad continued as if I hadn't spoken. "I won't be at your celebration. I hope you're happy now." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood there, phone in hand, a mixture of anger and disbelief washing over me. After everything, the apology, the promises to do better, here we were again. Sarah first, always Sarah. Deep down, I knew what this was. Sarah had most likely faked or exaggerated her condition to keep Dad from attending my wedding. It was her final power play, her way of ensuring she remained the center of Dad's world. But I couldn't prove it. More importantly, I didn't want to. I was done playing her games, done trying to win Dad's approval. This was my wedding day, and I refused to let them ruin it. Still, as the initial anger faded, a wave of sadness washed over me. Who would walk me down the aisle now? As if sensing my distress, Mom appeared at my door. "Honey, what's wrong?" Through tears, I explained the situation. Mom listened, her face a mix of sympathy and barely contained fury. "Oh, sweetie," she said, pulling me into a hug. "I'm so sorry, but you know what? What about your grandfather? He loves you so much, and I know he'd be honored to walk you down the aisle." The next day, as the wedding march began to play, I stood arm in arm with my grandfather. He beamed with pride, his eyes misty. As we walked down the aisle, I saw Michael waiting for me, his face radiant with love. I saw Mom, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I saw friends and family, all there to celebrate with us. And you know what? I didn't miss Dad's presence at all. The people who truly loved me, who had always been there for me, they were all here. The days following the wedding were a blissful whirlwind. As we settled into our new routine, I decided to share our joy with friends and family by posting some wedding photos on social media. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with comments full of congratulations and well wishes flooding in. But then, like a dark cloud on a sunny day, Sarah's name appeared in the notifications. With trepidation, I clicked on her comment, and felt my stomach churn as I read her words. How touching to see Rebecca being walked down the aisle by her grandfather. It's a shame her own father and his loving wife weren't even invited to this joyous occasion. I suppose we should be grateful for small mercies, at least this time she didn't infect anyone with rubella and ruin more lives. Remember, Rebecca, actions have consequences. I stared at the screen, a mixture of anger and disbelief washing over me. Even now, on what should have been the happiest day of my life, Sarah couldn't resist trying to hurt me. She was still clinging to that old guilt, wielding it like a weapon. Without hesitation, I blocked Sarah's account. Then, after a moment's consideration, I blocked Dad's too. It was time to cut them out of my life completely. As I set down my phone, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For years, I had carried the burden of guilt over the rubella incident. I had let Sarah's cruel words seep into my psyche, convincing me that I was somehow responsible for her inability to have children. But I was just a child myself then. I didn't know I was sick. I couldn't have known the consequences. It was a tragic accident, nothing more. You know, I said to Michael, my voice stronger than I expected, I'm done feeling guilty about the rubella. It wasn't my fault. None of it was my fault. Michael pulled me into a hug. Of course it wasn't. You were a kid, Becca. You didn't do anything wrong. As I melted into his embrace, I felt years of pent-up emotion begin to release. Tears flowed freely, but they weren't tears of sadness or guilt. They were tears of relief, of liberation. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into building my new life with Michael. We decorated our home, planned for the future, and surrounded ourselves with people who truly loved and supported us. Mom and my grandparents were frequent visitors, filling our home with laughter and warmth. My friends, who had stood by me through all the ups and downs, became an even more integral part of our lives. The road that led me here hadn't been easy. There had been pain, betrayal, and heartache along the way. But it had also led me to this moment, to this life filled with love and genuine happiness. I thought about the little girl I once was, constantly seeking approval and love from those who couldn't or wouldn't give it. I wished I could go back and tell her that it would all be okay, that she would find her way to happiness. But then I realized that little girl was still a part of me. And by choosing happiness now, by surrounding myself with love and cutting out toxicity, I was healing her too.